Welcome back to the Urban Herald. We're the team that takes these big, complex, global investigations and, well, we try to break down the systems behind them.
That's right.
And today we're launching a deep analysis based on one of our recent projects. It's about a public health crisis that honestly feels hidden in plain sight sometimes.
hmm
It gets obscured by all this talk about personal choice and individual diets. But the core issue is this staggering paradox.
It really is. We've been calling it the paradox on the plate. And it defines where we are globally right now. For the first time ever in documented history, more children worldwide are living with obesity than are underweight.
It sounds unbelievable when you say it like that.
It does, but this isn't some statistical fluke.
Yeah.
It's not just a trend happening here or there. It's the result of a huge, decades-long systematic transformation of our food environment globally.
Right.
So we have to stop looking at it as just individual failings and start asking, okay, what are the systems that actually engineered this situation?
Absolutely. And that's the focus for us today. When we planned this deep dive, we weren't interested in just, counting calories or offering diet tips. That's not what the Urban Herald does.
No.
We're analyzing what our source material really defines as the childhood obesity industry. So our mission today is to properly unpack this whole web. It's carefully constructed.
It is. You've got manipulation built right in.
Exactly. We're talking about foods engineered in labs, basically. Multi-billion-dollar marketing campaigns aimed right at kids. Really insidious policy interference, and just systemic profit making.
Of extraction, yeah.
Yeah, extracting profit by turning young bodies, developing bodies into revenue streams, and at the same time, pushing these huge health costs onto families, onto healthcare systems, onto all of us, really.
That's the critical lens, isn't it? We have to keep that focus. So over the next, say, half hour or so, we'll be diving into the sheer scale of this. It's genuinely historic. We'll dissect the industrial architecture, like how did they build this toxic food environment, step by step. We'll look at the toll it takes, the mental health impact, which is often overlooked, and the huge economic costs. And then, importantly, we'll review the solutions, the evidence-based ones that bodies like the WHO are pushing for.
Good. Because it's not just about identifying the problem.
No, it's about understanding the profit mechanisms. Because those are the things that need to be dismantled if we want real systemic change, not just tinkering around the edges.
Okay, let's start with the numbers then, because they really hit home how fast and how dramatically things have shifted, just in the last generation or so.
Yeah, the speed is key.
Confronting the scale means recognizing this isn't gradual. This is the defining shift in the modern food landscape. So globally, right now, how many kids and teens, say 5 to 19, are we talking about living with obesity?
Okay, the current estimates are, well, they're staggering, around 188 million children and adolescents in that age group.
188 million.
Yeah, that's about 9.4% of all kids and teens globally.
Hmm.
Now, like you said, that number has now officially passed the number who are underweight. That's about 184 million, or 9.2%.
That crossover point is just historic.
Yeah.
And deeply troubling.
It marks this new era, doesn't it? Where industrial food systems create both scarcity and surplus side by side. And if you add in those who are overweight, but not yet obese,
Right.
you're looking at roughly 1 in 5 young people worldwide. That's 391 million kids carrying excess weight.
1 in 5. Wow. But it's the speed, the trajectory that's maybe the most alarming part. This wasn't a slow creep.
No, not at all. It's an explosion. It shows just how quickly these industrial food systems can reshape human biology on a massive scale.
So the prevalence among 5 to 19-year-olds, it's more than quadrupled since, when, 1975?
That's right, since 1975. More than quadruple. Let's put numbers on it. Back in 75, less than 1% of kids were living with obesity.
Yeah.
Like 0.7% for girls, 0.9% for boys. Tiny numbers.
Okay.
By 2022, those numbers jumped to 6.9% for girls and 9.3% for boys.
That's a huge leap. It's exponential. We went from maybe 5 million girls and 6 million boys with obesity in 75 to around 65 million girls and 94 million boys in 2022. That kind of acceleration isn't biology changing, it's policy, it's the environment changing.
And it's not just a problem for wealthy nations anymore, is it? The regional variations show this is truly global.
Yeah.
Where are the hotspots?
Well, you see high rates everywhere, across all economic levels. Some Pacific Island nations have absolutely devastating rates, over 30% obesity in children.
30%?
Yeah. But then look elsewhere. Chile's at 27%, the U.S. 21%, the United Arab Emirates also 21%. Very different countries, different economies, cultures.
Right.
But they're all facing the same basic challenge, the spread of this industrial food model.
And the trend that really busts the myth The idea that this is just a Western problem is what's happening in low-income countries.
Exactly. That's maybe the most crucial statistic. The number of overweight children in low-income countries quadrupled between 2000 and 2022.
Yeah. It shows how effectively this model, cheap, long shelf life, heavily marketed products, penetrates every market. It pushes out traditional, more nutritious diets, even where money is tight. It's become a universal public health crisis driven by global corporate expansion.
And looking ahead, if things don't change drastically, the projections are pretty grim, aren't they?
They're horrifying, frankly. Current models, they suggest that without major coordinated interventions, by 2050, something like 60% of adults globally could be living with overweight or obesity.
60% of adults.
And 31% of children and adolescents. The World Obesity Federation already says over 1 billion people globally have obesity right now. That includes nearly 160 million kids aged 5 to 19. We're basically normalizing a state of chronic, preventable disease across the planet.
And just when we desperately needed to bend that curve downwards, the COVID-19 pandemic hit. And it acted like an accelerant, didn't it, for this whole crisis?
Ugh, a disastrous accelerant.
Yeah.
The pandemic just completely changed kids' relationships with food, with activity, with screens. School closures meant no structured sports, no PE for many. The stress, the uncertainty, it led to more emotional eating. And those changes, unfortunately, seem to have stuck around for a lot of kids, even after lockdowns ended.
And the research from that time showed kids were gaining weight much faster, like 2 or 3 times the pre-pandemic rate in some studies. What made the food environment so particularly bad during that period?
Well, several things hit at once. You had the psychological stress, obviously.
Yeah.
Disrupted sleep patterns. It was harder and maybe felt riskier to get fresh food, so convenience food became the default.
Right.
We saw a huge spike in reliance on these ultra-processed foods, the UPFs, just because they were easy and available. And critically, millions lost access to school meal programs.
That school meals point is so important. For so many kids, that's their most nutritious meal of the day. Losing that safety net during all that stress.
It had a massive impact. And the latest data confirms it. The WHO European region reported in late 2024, 25% of 7 to 9-year-olds are now overweight. 11% have obesity. And boys seem to be disproportionately affected.
Wow.
That post-pandemic snapshot really showed how vulnerable kids' food environments are when those basic structures, like schools providing meals and activity, get taken away.
But there's a lesson in that data too, isn't there? The sources mention that countries which managed to keep some systems going, like continuing school meals somehow, or providing structured online activity, or even subsidized fruit and veg boxes,
Yes.
those countries saw smaller increases in obesity rate.
Exactly. That's the proof of concept right there.
Yeah.
It shows pretty conclusively that the environment and policy are the key drivers. It's not just about individual willpower or parents trying harder. When the system steps in to protect the food environment, it makes a difference. When the system fails or steps back, well, the industrial food architecture just rushes in to fill the void.
Yeah.
Which leads us perfectly from the sheer scale of it all to the how. How did this happen? We have to look at the industrial architecture that's systematically undermining kids' health for profit.
Okay, let's break down those pillars you mentioned. Starting with the foundation, the product itself. The way ultra-processed foods, UPFs, have basically replaced traditional diets for so many kids. Just how common are UPFs now, and what makes them so effective for profit but so bad for health?
Well, they're not just treats anymore, they're staples. In
Uh-huh.
high-income countries, UPFs make up somewhere between 62% and 70% of kids' total daily calories now.
60 to 70%. That's the majority of their intake.
The vast majority. And we see studies, like one from Canada, showing kids getting nearly 47% of their calories from UPFs by age 3.
Age 3.
Age 3. So it sets up those preferences and habits for life incredibly early.
And it's not just that kids eat a lot of them, it's how they're designed, isn't it? These aren't just simple foods, they're engineered. Let's talk about that bliss point engineering.
Yeah, that's the core science. It's basically addiction science applied to food products. Bliss point engineering means formulating precise combinations of sugar, salt, and fat,
Right.
plus engineered textures, mouthfeel, aromas,
Yeah.
all designed to do 2 main things. First, override your natural I'm full signals.
Right.
The taste is intense immediately, but it fades quickly, making you want the next bite right away.
So you just keep going.
You keep going. Second, these ingredients are incredibly cheap for manufacturers and give the products a super long shelf life. That means Massive profit margins. And that's why the industry fights tooth and nail to protect these formulations.
And the neurological impact, that's the really scary part,
Yeah.
especially for developing brains. The source material mentioned these things might actually cross the blood-brain barrier. That sounds invasive. What accumulates? What does it disrupt in a kid's brain?
Yeah, that is probably the most alarming recent finding. The blood-brain barrier is there to protect the brain, right?
Mhm.
But some research suggests that compounds common in UPFs, things like emulsifiers, maybe artificial sweeteners, other additives might weaken that barrier.
Wow.
Now, what exactly accumulates long-term is still being figured out. But the immediate impact seems to be inflammation and disruption in the brain. UPFs affect regions involved in memory, in emotional regulation, and crucially, in impulse control and reward processing.
So it actually rewires the brain.
It seems to. It kind of rewires the child's brain to crave these super high reward, energy-dense foods. It sets up these cycles where resisting those foods becomes genuinely harder. And that obviously impacts learning and behavior too.
Which makes the timing, that early exposure, so critical. Tell us more about that Canadian study looking at kids age 3.
That study was pivotal because it showed the risk starts so young. It found kids getting almost half their energy from UPFs at just 3 years old had nearly a 20% higher risk of having overweight or obesity by age 5.
20% higher risk just from exposure at age 3.
Exactly. It shows how these lifelong habits, and maybe even these altered brain pathways, get established in those crucial early years. Long before a child has any real cognitive defense against the food environment they're put in. The study found the link was even stronger for boys, interestingly.
And it's not just about weight, is it? Eating lots of UPFs is linked to a whole cascade of other health problems.
Oh, absolutely. It's a major independent risk factor for type 2 diabetes, for cardiovascular disease later in life, and importantly for mental health issues like depression and anxiety. Plus, these foods are often low in essential micronutrients right when kids need them most for development. And connecting back to the brain, they seem to trigger this chronic low-level inflammation in brain tissue. That could contribute to long-term problems with mood and cognition.
Okay, so we have this product. Addictive, cheap to make, consumed in huge quantities, potentially rewiring kids' brains. How do manufacturers make sure it absolutely saturates the market? That brings us to the second pillar. Marketing to kids. The manipulation machine.
And it's a machine, right? One of the most sophisticated influence campaigns ever aimed at a specific group. Just look at the money spent. In the U.S. alone, food, drink, and restaurant companies spend over $2 billion a year targeting kids and teens specifically.
$2 billion just in the U.S.
Just in the U.S. Globally, the estimate is over $5 billion a year.
$5 billion. Put that in context. That's
Yeah.
more than the entire public health and nutrition budget for many whole countries combined, isn't it?
Easily. It creates this massive information asymmetry. The commercial voice just drowns out the public health voice. And that money is increasingly pouring into digital channels, which are much harder to regulate than old-school TV ads.
Right. TV ads are still there, but digital is where the real action is.
For sure. Kids might still see, 13 to 16 unhealthy food ads on TV daily. But online, companies build these entire immersive ecosystems. You've got advert games, branded online games designed purely to build positive feelings about products.
Like product placement, but interactive.
Exactly. Studies show about 1.2 million U.S. kids aged 6 to 11 visit these advert game sites run by food companies every month. And they spend significant time there, sometimes over an hour, on a single brand site. That's focused, uncritical engagement time.
And then there's social media, which turns kids' peers into marketers, essentially.
It's incredibly powerful. Even though platforms have age limits, something like 37% of 10 to 12-year-olds have social media accounts. And guess what? 9 of the top 20 global brands promoted on major platforms are food and beverage companies.
Wow.
They use influencers, algorithms. They blur the lines between entertainment and ads so effectively. It feels like a recommendation from a friend or someone they admire. It completely bypasses a child's developing critical thinking about advertising.
And Unicef found this works, right?
Yeah.
Kids see the ads, they want the products.
They absolutely do. UNICEF polled young people globally, 64,000 of them. 75% remembered seeing ads for sugary drinks, snacks, or fast food in the last week.
3/4 of them.
Yeah. And the kicker, 60% said those ads increased their desire to buy or eat those things.
Yeah.
Even in places affected by conflict, these messages get through. 68% reported seeing them. It's relentless.
And the sophistication goes beyond just showing the product. They're using psychology, even neuroscience.
They really are. It's not just cartoon characters anymore, though they still use those. They employ behavioral psychologists. They They use neuroscientists to design messages that tap into known developmental vulnerabilities in kids,
Like what?
like using celebrity endorsements,
Hmm.
character licensing from popular movies or games. Creating these tie-ins, the goal is to position these often nutrient-poor products not just as food, but as symbols of fun, friendship, fitting in, even achievement.
Mm.
They're designing campaigns to overcome kids' natural skepticism and bypass parental gatekeeping, to make wanting and consuming these products feel almost inevitable.
Okay, so addictive product, hyper sophisticated marketing. The third piece is ensuring they can keep doing this. Section C, policy interference. How does the industry lobby governments to protect their ability to market and sell this stuff, even when public health bodies are sounding the alarm?
This is maybe the most insidious part because it's largely hidden. They spend millions every year specifically to influence policy, to block or water down regulations that could actually prevent obesity. A really clear example came out in the UK thanks to Freedom of Information requests.
Right, the Soil Association got those documents. What did they show? What were the tactics?
They show the Food and Drink Federation, which represents the big players, your Coca-Colas, Nestle's, PepsiCo's, Unilevers, putting intense pressure on government officials. They wanted to kill plans that would have encouraged retailers to promote fresh, minimally processed foods.
How did they frame their argument?
They framed health guidance as being anti-business. They literally told officials that promoting fresh food over their members' processed products was a real bone of contention. They argued it threatened their business model.
So they pitted public health directly against corporate profit.
Exactly. They even reportedly claimed the science does not support the idea that fresh foods are inherently better than their engineered products. And they won.
They won.
Yeah. The government guidance was rewritten. Instead of promoting fresh fruit and veg, it got diluted to vague language about promoting undefined, healthier options, which, guess what, could include things like energy drinks, certain crisps, sugary yogurts, confectionery.
Unbelievable. So the lobbying worked perfectly.
It worked perfectly. And this isn't just a UK thing. It's a global playbook.
Where else have we seen this kind of effective interference?
Well, think about New Zealand. Transnational dairy and baby food companies successfully lobbied against updated standards for infant formula marketing. They used the classic arguments, risks to exports, jobs, and managed to get NZ to opt out of joint health standards designed to protect babies.
Hmm.
In the EU, estimates suggest food and drink lobby groups spend over $21 million a year influencing regulations there. They constantly push for weak, voluntary codes of conduct instead of mandatory rules that would actually have teeth.
And how do they maintain such influence? It seems like public health voices should have more sway, but they often don't.
It boils down to access, resources, and a lack of transparency. Lobbying disclosure rules are often full of loopholes. A quick phone call, an email, an informal chat doesn't get recorded.
Right.
So most of the activity stays hidden. And studies show industry lobbyists meet with policymakers something like 10 to 15 times more often than child health advocates do.
10 to 15 times.
Yeah. They hire former government officials who know the system. They fund research that conveniently casts doubt on public health science. They create these front groups that look like independent consumer or scientific bodies, but are actually industry funded. It creates this systematic information imbalance, ensuring that policy decisions consistently lean towards protecting profits over public health.
Okay, so we've mapped out the architecture, the addictive product, the pervasive marketing, the policy shield protecting it all. Now we need to look at the consequences. What does this engineered system actually do to kids and to our collective finances? Let's start with the individual toll, the link between childhood obesity and mental health.
This is so crucial and often gets sidelined. The impact goes way beyond the physical risks like diabetes or heart problems.
Right.
Research consistently shows kids living with obesity face much higher risks of depression and anxiety.
Higher.
A major meta-analysis looking at over 100,000 kids found those with obesity were 32% more likely to experience depression compared to their peers at healthy weights.
32%. That's a really significant jump. But the sources also talked about the social and emotional trauma being particularly severe. There was that really stark comparison made.
Yes, that comparison. It's arresting, isn't it? It highlights the profound burden. Researchers found that using standard health-related quality of life measures, some children with obesity report scores even poorer than kids with cancer.
That's incredibly shocking. How do researchers explain that? Because cancer carries such acute trauma.
It's not comparing the clinical experience, obviously. It's about the quality of life impact, specifically the psychosocial aspect. The thinking is, cancer, while terrifying, often brings societal support, empathy, a sense of shared battle. Obesity, sadly, is often treated as a personal moral failing.
Ah, right. The stigma.
Exactly. Kids face relentless bullying, isolation, discrimination, often starting within their own families or at school. It's this pervasive daily social marginalization that erodes self-worth so deeply it shows up in those quality of life scores. It's the chronic nature of the stigma.
And the terrible irony is the environment causing the obesity is largely outside their control, but they end up blaming themselves.
Precisely. A child can't control the $5 billion marketing blitz, or whether their neighborhood has safe parks and affordable fresh food, or what the school sells in its vending machines. But society focuses on willpower, so the child internalizes this immense shame and guilt. That's a direct pathway to depression and anxiety that can last a lifetime.
Does this hit boys and girls differently?
The data suggests it does. Girls with obesity show a 44% higher likelihood of depression compared to normal weight girls. The link is definitely there for boys too, but it seems less pronounced.
Why the difference?
It's likely tied to the intense social pressures around body image, especially for girls, often starting at younger ages. Media portrayals, peer expectations, girls face harsher scrutiny about appearance, which seems to magnify the psychological distress.
And let's not forget the brain connection we talked about earlier. There's a biological loop reinforcing this, isn't there?
Yes, absolutely. It becomes a vicious cycle. We know childhood obesity affects brain regions involved in executive functions, memory, emotional regulation, decision-making. Changes in reward pathways can make it biologically harder to resist those high-calorie, low-nutrient foods. This compounds the weight issue and the psychological distress from feeling unable to control it.
Okay, let's shift to the other side of the toll, the economic burden. This whole system seems like a textbook case of market failure. Huge private profits, massive public costs down the line. How stark is that contrast?
It's incredibly stark. You've got the global market for child-focused food and drinks heading towards, what, $147 billion by 2025. Companies make huge profits, especially in these UPS that cost very little to produce, but sell well thanks to marketing and convenience.
So profits are high because production costs are low and health risks are ignored.
Essentially, yes. The health risks are externalized. They become costs borne by others.
So what are those costs? How much extra are we spending on healthcare because of childhood obesity?
Well, the estimates suggest the increased annual medical costs directly due to childhood overweight and obesity are around $308 per affected child per year.
Okay, $308 per child per year.
Now multiply that by the 188 million kids globally living with obesity. You're looking at roughly $45 billion in extra medical costs every single year. That's money falling mainly on public healthcare systems, on insurers, on families themselves, money that could be spent elsewhere.
And if we zoom in on the U.S. with its high rates, the long-term projections are even more alarming, right?
They're astronomical. Right now, direct medical costs in the U.S. are already billions per year. But looking ahead to 2050, projections estimate that just adolescent overweight and obesity will cause nearly $14 billion in direct medical costs annually.
$14 billion direct.
Plus another $49 billion in indirect costs each year. That's things like lost productivity from illness, absenteeism, premature death. It's a massive drain on the future economy.
And what about the cost to the individual person throughout their life? This follows them, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. German research tried to quantify this lifetime burden. They found individuals who had obesity in childhood face lifetime costs that are 3.7 times higher for men and 5 times higher for women compared to those who maintained a healthy weight.
3 to 5 times higher lifetime costs. What does that include?
Higher spending on medications, more hospital visits, but also lost income potential due to managing chronic diseases. It adds up to tens of thousands of euros per person over a lifetime. And this burden often falls hardest on lower-income families, the very same families, often targeted most heavily by UPF marketing.
So let's really hammer home that final ratio, the externalization. How much future cost is generated by the industry's spending on marketing?
Recent economic modeling gives us a pretty shocking ratio for this market failure. Get this. Every single dollar spent marketing ultra-processed foods to children is estimated to generate between $15 and $20 in future healthcare costs.
$15 to $20 in future costs for every dollar spent on ads.
Exactly. It's the definition of a perverse incentive structure. The business model isn't just unsustainable, it's actively transferring wealth from future public health budgets and individual well-being directly into current corporate profits.
Okay, the picture of the problem, the industry's role. It's incredibly clear and, frankly, pretty damning. But the source material doesn't just leave us there. It offers a clear roadmap for solutions based on solid evidence.
That's right. And the key shift is moving away from blaming individuals and towards fixing the system that's failing them. The solutions have to match the scale of the problem.
We can't just tell parents to try harder against a multi-billion-dollar manipulation machine.
Exactly. And the WHO's updated Best Buys for 2024-2025 really lay out that roadmap. They emphasize comprehensive policy packages, not single interventions, because anything done in isolation just gets swamped or bypassed by the industry.
So, top of the list, mandatory marketing restrictions and clear labeling. What's the best example of this working?
Chili is widely seen as the gold standard here. They didn't just do one thing. They did a package. Mandatory, front-of-pack, black octagonal warning labels on unhealthy foods.
Those stark black warning signs, right?
Yes, very clear, very simple, combined with strict limits on marketing unhealthy foods to kids, including using cartoon characters or toys, and strong policies about what could be sold or marketed in schools.
Why did the black octagons work so well?
Because they're universally understood symbols of warning or prohibition. They cut through literacy issues, cultural differences, marketing spin. It's just a clear danger signal right there on the package. Simple and effective.
And the results in Chile, were they measurable?
Oh, absolutely. Within just 5 years, they saw significant changes across the population. Purchases of high-sugar breakfast cereals dropped by 27%. High-sodium packaged snacks, down 58% in households with kids.
Wow, those are big drops.
Huge. And importantly, these changes happened across all income groups. It shows that strong mandatory policies like this can actually reduce health inequalities, not just help those who are already health conscious.
Okay, so clear information and restricting marketing works. What about fiscal policies? Taxes on sugary drinks seem popular globally. Do they work?
Yes, fiscal policies are powerful tools. They tackle both supply and demand. Raising the price discourages people from buying unhealthy products, and the tax revenue can fund health initiatives. Mexico's sugar-sweetened beverage, SBB tax, is a great example.
What happened there?
They put a tax of 1 peso per liter on sugary drinks. Purchases dropped by 12% overall pretty quickly. But among low-income households, often the biggest consumers and targets of marketing purchases, fell by 17%.
So it had a bigger impact on the groups most at risk.
Exactly. And the revenue generated, over $3 billion in the first 4 years alone. That money can go straight into things like installing water fountains in schools, funding healthy eating programs, running public health campaigns. It forces the industry and consumers to internalize some of those externalized costs we talked about.
Makes sense. Beyond labels and taxes, what about fixing the school environment itself?
Schools are absolutely vital. They're places where you can implement mandatory policies effectively and shield kids from constant marketing during the day. Uruguay provides a strong example here.
What did Uruguay do?
They banned all marketing in schools for any food or drink that didn't meet national health standards.
Yeah.
No posters, no branded equipment, nothing. The result? Sales of unhealthy snacks from vending machines dropped by 78%.
78% drop.
While sales of healthier options jumped 156%, it shows what happens when you change the default environment. And the WHO is very clear.
Yeah.
Voluntary industry pledges don't work. They get watered down, ignored. You need mandatory government-enforced policies in schools.
Okay, let's shift to solutions focused on the earliest years. Early childhood and community approaches. The sources stress intervening really early, right? Prenatal through age 5.
Yes, that's the critical window for establishing lifelong eating habits and taste preferences. Programs like Healthy Beginnings in Australia showed real success. They used home visits by nurses for families with infants.
What did the nurses focus on?
Things like monitoring growth, but also teaching responsive feeding techniques. That means helping parents learn to recognize their baby's hunger and fullness cues and responding appropriately rather than, say, always trying to get them to finish the bottle or using food as a reward or pacifier. These interventions led to significantly lower BMI later on.
So it's about building healthy feeding relationships right from the start.
Exactly. And alongside that, promoting and supporting breastfeeding remains one of the most cost-effective interventions we have. But again, policy matters.
How so? What's needed beyond just encouraging it?
You need to actively counter the aggressive marketing of formula milk. Singapore is highlighted as a good example. They combine strong support for mothers' lactation consultants, support of hospital policies, with strict enforcement of the international code that limits how formula can be marketed.
So it's protecting breastfeeding by restricting the marketing that undermines it.
Precisely. You need both the support and the protection from commercial pressures.
Finally, what about community-wide approaches? going beyond individual families or clinics to change the whole neighborhood environment, especially in disadvantaged areas.
These are crucial for tackling health inequalities because we know the environment access to parks, safe streets, affordable, healthy food outlets varies hugely. Australia's Romp and Chomp program is a good model.
What did Romp and Chomp involve?
It was multi-layered. It targeted thousands of kids through childcare centers, providing staff training on nutrition and activity. It included education for families. But it also involved local policy advocacy working to improve healthy food access and play spaces in the community.
So it connected childcare, families, and local government.
Yes. And by tackling all those levels, they achieved sustained reductions in kids' BMI and improvements in diet quality. It shows you need that coordinated action across different sectors, especially to reach families facing the biggest environmental barriers.
It really comes back to making the healthy choice the easy choice, doesn't it? By fixing the environment around the child, the school canteen, the local shop, the park, the advertising they see, that seems like the only way to counter the scale of the industrial influence. Hashtag outro.
Wrapping this up.
Mm.
The evidence we've looked at is pretty overwhelming, isn't it? The industry consistently prioritizes profit over children's health. It uses incredibly sophisticated science and marketing, plus hidden policy influence to do it.
Yeah.
And the conclusion, echoed by global health leaders like UNICEF's Catherine Russell, is stark. She said, ultra-processed food is increasingly replacing fruits, vegetables, and protein at a time when nutrition plays a critical role in children's growth, cognitive development, and mental health. It's happening right when good nutrition matters most.
And solving it just can't be about asking parents to fight harder against this engineered environment. That's like asking someone to swim upstream against a tidal wave. The solutions have to be systemic.
They have to match the scale and the sophistication of the industry's influence. That means mandatory population-wide policies. Not suggestions, not voluntary codes, real rules.
And we know these can work.
We absolutely do. We have the proof from countries that have been brave enough to act comprehensively. Chile's warning labels and marketing bans, France's restrictions on ads during kids' TV times, Portugal's sugary drink taxes. These show that when governments actually use the public health evidence and have the political will, they can achieve rapid, positive, and equitable results. The time for tinkering, for half measures, is really over.
We spent this time uncovering how pervasive and often how hidden the lobbying and influence is, how it shapes the food environments our kids grow up in, from what's sold in schools to what's advertised constantly, maybe even zoning laws about where fast food chains can open near parks or schools. So the challenge we want to leave with you, the listener, is this. Now that you know about this hidden architecture, start looking around your own community. What specific policies, what regulations? Maybe it is the zoning laws. Maybe it's the contracts your local school board signs for vending machines or cafeteria food. Where might the hidden influence of this childhood obesity industry be at play right now?
Yeah.
And maybe more importantly, what needs to happen to bring that influence out into the open? What mechanisms do we need to demand transparency and accountability to make sure the health of the next generation isn't being traded away quietly?
Use the evidence. Question the status quo where you live. Ask the uncomfortable questions. That's always the first step towards changing the environment.
Thank you for joining the Urban Herald team for this deep dive into the source material. We hope it gave you some things to think about.